Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are undertaking quite a critical mission, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, charting the territory of your internal architecture. We're looking for those mechanisms, the ones that provide that crucial inner
it's a
source.
reliable foundation.
Exactly. For calm, clarity, and, well, genuine courage, even when things outside are chaotic.
Right. This really is a deep dive into self-governance, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Many people feel that pull, they're intuitively seeking this core self,
Mm-hmm.
a place that feels, untouched by all the daily emotional ups and downs.
And we should be clear, while we aren't sticking to just one therapeutic model today.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But our source material, it gives us this really powerful, multifaceted map. It draws from psychology, neurology, even philosophy. We've got Jung, Festinger, Porges, Dweck. Quite a lineup.
That's exactly our goal. We're trying to synthesize this rich collection, mapping out three interconnected pillars that allow for this internal coherence.
Okay, so what are the three?
Right, so first, the drive for cognitive, let's call it clarity. Second, the nature of the felt self, how we actually experience being ourselves.
Okay.
And third, the physiological foundation,
Yeah.
what's needed in the body for authentic agency and regulating our emotions.
So we're kind of reverse engineering that feeling of being centered.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We're asking, how do these different systems, psychological and biological, actually cooperate? How do they build an inner architecture that's, sturdy enough?
Sturdy enough to support a life lived with real intention, with presence.
Yeah. Let's try and unpack this blueprint for you.
Okay, let's start with what drives our thinking, our immediate decision-making. It's this really innate human desire for internal harmony.
Right.
Part one dives straight into Leon Festinger's core idea here. Individuals strive quite intensely, actually, for consistency in their beliefs, opinions, their behaviors.
And when that alignment breaks down.
That's when we get what he famously called cognitive dissonance.
And what's fascinating, I think, is that dissonance isn't just like a small inconvenience.
No.
Or a slight logical disagreement. Festinger saw it as a state of really profound psychological discomfort.
Like an internal alarm bell.
Exactly. We're basically wired biologically and psychologically to reduce this discomfort. And that motivation, that drive, it often overrides our commitment to, well, objective truth.
The need for relief is that strong.
It's immediate and powerful. We want that internal tension gone.
And the most common way we do that, maybe the most human way, is through rationalization, right? Cognitive rationalization.
We see all the time. In small daily choices.
Yeah.
You mentioned a perfect example before we started recording, the dessert dilemma.
Ah, yes. The person who knows intellectually that eating dessert all the time isn't healthy.
Right. But instead of changing the behavior, stopping the dessert, the mind takes the easier path.
It changes the knowledge to fit the behavior.
Precisely. They introduce a consonant cognition, a justification. Oh, it's okay sometimes. Or, oh, we'll work out extra hard tomorrow. Or even,
My day was so stressful, I deserve this.
exactly. This indulgence is necessary for my mental health. The logic might be shaky, maybe even completely flawed, but the immediate internal stress, it gets resolved.
Because those contradictory ideas, I want this and this is bad for me, they've been momentarily pushed into alignment.
Reconciled, yeah. At least for now.
But this isn't just about small habits, is it? It gets really unavoidable after we make any kind of significant choice. This leads us to post-decision dissonance.
Yes, absolutely. Dissonance is pretty much an inevitable outcome of any important decision, especially when the options you didn't choose were also attractive.
So the moment you commit,
Your brain immediately starts that second-guessing routine. It generates discomfort about the potential benefits you might have missed out on.
and the intensity of that feeling, that post-decision anxiety,
It's directly proportional to how important the choice felt and, crucially, how attractive those rejected options were.
that flicker of doubt, that feeling sometimes called buyer's remorse, that's the dissonance kicking in.
It is. And the sources give that great, very concrete example from consumer behavior, the new car buyer.
Right. Tell us about that study.
Well, studies found that people who had just bought a car were far more likely to actively read advertisements and reviews for the specific model they just purchased.
Compared to reading about the ones they considered but rejected.
Exactly. They weren't looking for broader market understanding, for their next purchase. They were hunting for consonant information.
Validation. Proof they made the right call.
Yes. To neutralize that uncomfortable feeling, that little nagging voice saying, maybe, just maybe, that other car was actually better.
So the goal isn't really about getting better information for the future. The goal is mental peace right now.
Precisely. And this is achieved through, well, mainly two mitigation methods the sources highlight.
Okay, what are they?
First, we engage in a kind of cognitive distortion. We actively emphasize the positives of the thing we chose.
And downplay the negatives.
Right. And at the same time, we minimize the positives of the rejected options and maybe even exaggerate their negatives.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second method?
The second is establishing what's called cognitive overlap. We start looking for commonalities between what we chose and what we've rejected.
How does that help?
It creates a broader, sort of more cohesive narrative. It makes the initial choice feel less like a stark binary decision and more like, well, they were actually quite similar in these important ways, so my choice was contextually correct. It softens the edges of the decision.
This drive for internal clarity, for relief, though, it has a problematic side effect, doesn't it? It can lock us into fixed ways of thinking, confirmation bias.
It's the inevitable dark side, you could say, of dissonance reduction, because we're so driven to seek information that aligns with what we already believe and feel.
We simultaneously become really good at avoiding anything that might introduce more dissonance.
Exactly. We actively steer clear of challenging information. We build, effectively, an echo chamber around our own beliefs. And that makes it incredibly difficult to engage in genuine critical thinking or, frankly, to change our minds even when presented with contradictory evidence.
I think the challenge for you listening is recognizing that this process is largely automatic.
Oh, very much so.
And it often happens under pressure, strong emotions, tight deadlines. So if the aim is truth, or at least a clearer picture and not just relief, how do we interrupt that automatic pull?
That's where something like the Bias Interruption Protocol, BIP, comes in. It's a structured technique designed to force a pause.
A pause and a re-engagement with reality.
Yes. It's specifically triggered when you face those high-stakes moments. Intense emotion, extreme time pressure, or even just that gut feeling that something seems a bit too good to be true, which can itself be a sign of bias.
Okay, so how does it work? It's 3 steps.
3 steps.
Yeah.
Step 1, name the pull. You have to explicitly recognize the motivational force that's currently active. You actually articulate, maybe just to yourself, what you're doing. Okay, I notice I'm seeking relief right now, not necessarily the truth. Or, I feel myself defaulting to the quickest answer just to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling.
So consciously naming it kind of externalizes the impulse.
Exactly. Gives you a chance to wrestle with it, rather
Yeah.
than just being carried away by it.
Okay, step 1, name the pull. Then comes the intellectual counterattack, the 2 questions.
Yes. Step 2, ask the 2 counters. First, what would change my mind? And second, what am I not seeing?
Great, let's break those down. What would change my mind?
This forces you to define, in concrete terms, what evidence or perspective shift would actually cause you to abandon your current belief or course of action. It's a necessary step for genuine intellectual honesty. If nothing could change your mind, you're not really thinking critically, are you?
Good point. And the second question, what am I not seeing?
This forces you to broaden your focus, to look beyond the narrow set of data points that are conveniently confirming your existing bias. It pushes you to actively seek out blind spots or alternative interpretations.
So it forces the system, which wants relief, to actually start searching for disconfirming data, potentially uncomfortable data.
Exactly. And step 3 is the most practical anchor. Take one measurement.
Meaning get some external data.
Precisely. Gather an objective baseline, look up a standard rate, find an independent third-party estimate, something outside your own head.
So if you're feeling overly optimistic about, say, a sales projection, which might be a way to reduce dissonance about past performance.
Right. The measurement might be looking up the actual average market growth rate for the last 5 years, or seeking an unbiased estimate from an outside consultant who has no emotional stake in it.
It requires engaging with external reality using data.
Yes. It shifts your operations from purely internal, often emotionally driven calculations towards objective verification.
So moving from that automatic dissonance reduction to this more intentional BIP engagement, it's a shift from just seeking temporary mental comfort.
Towards establishing genuine, more fact-based clarity. It takes effort, but it's crucial for clearer thinking.
Okay, so if part 1 was about how we try to align our thoughts for clarity, the next logical step seems to be understanding what we're aligning them to.
The architecture of the self itself.
Exactly. We need to go a bit deeper than just the everyday ego, the personality we present. We need to look at the deeper internal structure. Let's start with Jung. He made a really profound distinction here.
He did. Jung defined the self-capital as self, not as the center of personality we typically interact with day to day. That, for him, was the ego.
The ego is the center of our conscious awareness.
Right. The self, however, is much bigger. It encompasses the ego and the entire unconscious. It's the psychic totality, the true center of the whole personality, a kind of higher unity.
That makes the ego sound almost like the front desk manager of a hotel.
While the self is the entire building, maybe even the land it's built on.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, the self is more akin to concepts like Atman in Hinduism or Purusha. It's seen as the regulating center for the whole psyche. When someone is really connected to their self, their actions tend to feel more coherent, more grounded, more unified,
Why is that?
because they're channeling this totality, this larger whole, rather than just operating from the perspective of the ego, which can be quite fragmented, anxious, and, focused on immediate concerns.
And the sources, they use mythology, don't they, to suggest this self isn't just a static core, but it's actually the source of vitality, the energy keeping the whole system going.
Yes, Jung talked about this idea of the immortal being, the core self, often issuing from something humble, forgotten, maybe even repressed, like the transformation of a neglected fish in some myths.
What does that symbolize?
It symbolizes the nourishing influence of the unconscious contents. The self constantly injects vitality, psychic energy into consciousness when we feel burned out, stuck, creatively blocked.
It often means the ego has become cut off from this deeper root.
Exactly. Cut off from that deep wellspring that provides the continual influx of energy we need for psychological movement, for growth, for feeling truly alive.
What I find so compelling about this, though, is that this core self isn't just theoretical. William James, another giant, insisted it's something profoundly felt.
Yes.
It's not just an idea we grasped intellectually.
James was absolutely adamant about this. He said the central nucleus of the self is a direct, sensible acquaintance. You feel it. It's not just a summation of your memories or an abstract concept, or even just a word like me or I.
It's a present reality experienced in the body.
Yes, at any given moment of consciousness. Now, James was clear, you never feel the self alone. It's always fused with whatever else is happening, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations. But it provides that unique quality of mindness to the experience. It's the fundamental sense of being here, now, experiencing this.
This brings us right to the idea of embodiment and internal cohesion. If the self is fundamentally felt, then the body must be the primary pathway to accessing that core.
That's the implication. And we see the absolute necessity of this illustrated in some extreme neurological cases.
Yeah.
Like Oliver Sacks's famous study of Dr. P.
Dr. P, the man who mistook his wife for a hat.
That's the one.
Yeah.
He had severe visual agnosia. He literally tried to pick up his wife's head off her shoulders, thinking it was his hat on a coat rack. He had lost the world as representation, visually speaking. His visual cognition just couldn't process or make sense of what he saw.
But his sense of self wasn't gone.
Not at all. His sense of self, his ability to navigate and interact with the world was wholly preserved, but through a different channel, as music or will.
Yeah.
He possessed what Sacks brilliantly termed body music.
Body music. How did that work? What did it look like?
It was like an internal rhythm, a deeply felt sense of cadence and motion that allowed him to move fluently, dress himself, eat, perform complex tasks. But if the inner music stopped,
He stopped.
literally, he would just freeze until the music, the internal rhythm, started again. And crucially, think about this. He recognized his students not by their faces, which were just meaningless patterns to him,
How then?
by their movements,
Yeah.
their unique way of carrying themselves, their gestures. He recognized their internal rhythm, their body music.
Wow. That's incredible. It demonstrates that a deep, coherent self can be maintained through this felt sense, through interoception, even when high-level cognitive processing like vision completely breaks down.
The self is in the movement, the rhythm, the embodiment itself,
Yeah.
not just in the thoughts about the self.
So if if you listening want to access that Jungian self, that deep regulating center, we need to find ways to bypass the chattering ego and tap into that felt reality in the body.
Absolutely. And clinicians working with trauma, like Bessel van der Kolk, really emphasize this. He states clearly that the foundation of emotional awareness is the ability to perceive visceral sensations.
Those gut feelings.
Those gut feelings, the subtle tightness in your chest, the warmth spreading in your stomach. If we want authentic change, we want to connect with our innermost recesses, as van der Kolk puts it, We have to learn to follow these interoceptive pathways. We need to activate and learn to interpret those bodily signals.
So James is felt self and, say, Porges's neurobiology, which we'll get to, they really converge here.
They do. The internal architecture, that core sense of self, is accessed primarily through the body, not just through abstract thinking or mental analysis.
That provides amazing clarity, actually. Accessing that inner source isn't just about navel-gazing or introspection in the purely mental sense. It's about intentional listening to the physical landscape of ourselves.
Well said. It's an embodied listening.
Okay, so once we've worked on clarity, part one, and we've connected more to that felt sense, that source of energy, part two, we can move to part three, agency. How do we actually direct that energy towards growth, towards meaningful action?
Right. And often we look for the single reason why we do something.
But Abraham Maslow reminds us it's usually not that simple. Most behavior, he said, is multi-motivated or overdetermined.
This is such a vital correction to those overly simplistic views of human drive, isn't it? A single action rarely serves just one purpose.
It's usually expressing several needs at once.
Often, yes. It can simultaneously express needs from different levels of its hierarchy. Basic physiological needs, the need for safety, for love and belonging, for esteem, and sometimes even a striving towards self-actualization, all bundled into one behavior.
Can you give us that classic example he used? The complexity within a single act.
Sure, think about the act of making love. On the surface, okay, it satisfies a basic physiological need, sexual release.
But Maslow says there's often more going on.
Much more, potentially. It could simultaneously be expressing a need for affirmation of masculinity, of femininity. It could be about conquest, boosting esteem, or it could be primarily about seeking basic affection, closeness, reinforcing a bond, fulfilling the need for belonging.
The action is one, but the driving forces are stacked, layered, complex. That complexity, though, suggests something interesting. If we can become more aware of those multiple layers of motivation behind our actions, maybe we can shift our perspective and even reprogram our behavior.
Precisely. When we recognize that a difficult habit, maybe exercise or studying or sticking to a budget, isn't just fulfilling some basic obligation, but is also satisfying higher needs, perhaps esteem, I'm capable, self-actualization, I'm growing, we can leverage that understanding.
How?
Well, one source talks about reprogramming the brain by consciously shifting the language we use, moving from "you have to do this," which frames behaviors as heavy burdens, chores.
To you get to do this.
Exactly. Reframing them as opportunities. Opportunities to meet those underlying multi-layered needs we just talked about. This simple linguistic shift, practiced consistently, can genuinely change how we feel about the task. It can turn a mandatory chore into a recognized privilege, a chance for growth.
That perspective shift links nicely to Alfred Adler, who focused so intensely on the driving force behind all this complexity, what he called the striving drive.
Yes. Adler had a fascinating take. He proposed that every single individual starts life with a universal feeling of weakness or inferiority.
Because we're born helpless.
Completely helpless and dependent. This initial vulnerability, he argued, is what fundamentally drives us. It pushes us toward what he called an ideal end form, a goal of superiority, of competence, aimed at overcoming life's inherent difficulties. We are constantly striving for mastery, for a feeling of capability.
So that feeling of inferiority isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not a pathology.
Not inherently, no. Adler saw it as the basic engine of human ambition and achievement. But, and this is crucial, that engine, that striving drive, can be steered in two very different directions.
Okay.
Adler mapped out the useful side and the useless, antisocial side of striving.
What's the difference?
The useful side involves developing what he called social interest. The individual finds meaning and feels valuable by contributing positively to society, to the community. They realize that true superiority isn't about dominating others, but about competence deployed for mutual benefit.
And the useless side.
That's driven by a desire for purely personal superiority, often involving domination, putting others down, seeking prestige at the expense of genuine connection. It leads to a feeling of isolated specialness, maybe, but no real sense of belonging or true worth.
This distinction feels critical because that useful path seems to align with the authentic self we talked about earlier.
While the useless path feels much more like ego defense mechanisms running wild.
Right.
And that useless path helps explain mechanisms like what Adler called neurotic avoidance.
How does that work?
The neurotic individual, according to Adler, shifts all their focus, all their interest onto their symptoms, their anxiety, their phobias, their physical complaints. They essentially declare themselves unable to solve life's major tasks, finding meaningful work, building healthy relationships, contributing creatively on account of the symptoms.
They use the symptom as a kind of psychological shield, an excuse.
It's the ultimate alibi, yes. It protects their prestige, their self-esteem. By blaming the symptom, they avoid the risk of actually trying and potentially failing at a major life task.
So they never have to confront the possibility that they might not be as superior or capable as they like to imagine.
Exactly. The symptom allows them to preserve their belief in their potential superiority, because that potential is never actually put to the test in the real world. The life task remains daunting, intimidating, but crucially unsolved, and therefore their sense of self is, in a twisted way, protected from failure.
To break out of that kind of stagnation, that avoidance, we clearly need a different relationship with challenge, with effort. Which brings us directly to Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset.
Yes, the growth mindset is so fundamental here. At its core, it's a belief in the value of effort and the potential for development through dedication and hard work. Our abilities aren't fixed.
And this belief fuels certain behaviors.
Absolutely. It fuels a zest for learning. It makes people open, even eager for feedback, seeing it as useful information, not judgment. And crucially, it enables them to confront obstacles directly, viewing them as opportunities to learn and improve, rather than as signs they should just give up.
Whereas the opposite, the fixed mindset.
If you believe your abilities are fixed, you're either smart or you're not, talented or not, then challenge becomes deeply threatening. Effort seems pointless, because if you have the ability, you shouldn't need effort. And failure is devastating because it feels like a direct verdict on your fixed, inadequate self.
So people with a fixed mindset tend to avoid effort, avoid seeking help.
Yes, because needing help implies inadequacy. Their focus shifts entirely to proving their existing inherent superiority, which cycles right back to Adler's useless side of striving, always needing to look smart or capable rather than actually getting smarter or more capable.
And the failure mode of this fixed mindset can be really destructive, can it?
Terribly so. Our sources point to the famous example of Leon Festinger. Started his career with incredible talent, real passion for the car business, huge success.
But then,
As his success grew, his need to constantly prove his inherent fixed superiority seemed to intensify. It became dominant. When he later faced huge challenges at Chrysler, instead of embracing the struggle and learning, he resorted to the primary weapon of the fixed mindset.
blame. Blaming others for setbacks.
Constantly. Blaming the market, blaming his team, blaming regulations. This focus on blame, Dweck argues, extinguished his own enjoyment, stifled creativity within the company, and ultimately undermined his ability to lead effectively through the crisis. He was too busy protecting his image of fixed genius to actually engage in the messy process of problem solving.
So the practical question then becomes, how do we nurture that growth mindset in ourselves, in our kids, in our teams? How do we focus on the process, not just the outcome?
The emphasis must be on process. It's about changing what we pay attention to and what we praise.
So instead of just saying, wow, you're so smart, or great result.
Exactly. We should inquire about the effort that went into it, the strategies they used, the learning that happened along the way, asking questions like, how did you figure that out? Or, that was tough, what steps did you take when you got stuck? Or, what did you learn from trying it that way?
That shifts the focus from proving a fixed state of being.
To celebrating the mechanism of improvement. The struggle, the learning, the persistence, that's what keeps the engine of striving on Adler's useful path, the path of genuine growth and contribution.
Okay, this has been a fantastic map of the internal psychological dynamics, getting clarity, connecting with the self, exercising agency. But none of this works reliably if we're constantly feeling threatened or overwhelmed, right?
Absolutely not. All these higher-level cognitive and emotional mechanisms rely on a bedrock of safety, physiological regulation. If the body is stuck in a state of threat, the best cognitive strategies, the deepest connection to self, they just fall apart.
So part 4 brings us squarely into the neurobiology of safety. And we have to start with Stephen Porges and his polyvagal theory.
Porges gave us the fundamental concept of neuroception. This isn't perception like consciously seeing or hearing something. It's the nervous system's constant, adaptive, and crucially non-conscious task of assessing risk in the environment.
So it's happening automatically, beneath awareness.
All the time. The system is continually scanning for cues in our environment, in other people's voices or faces, even inside our own bodies, cues that signal safety, danger, or extreme life threat.
And the critical implication here is that feeling safe isn't something we just think ourselves into.
No, It's a physiological state that has to be registered by the nervous system first.
And only if the environment is neurocepted is safe.
Only then can the nervous system inhibit those more primitive limbic structures that control our reflexive defense responses: fight, flight, or freeze. If safety isn't registered down at that neuroceptive level, we default to defense.
And higher level functions get shut down?
Immediately curtailed. Things like curiosity, empathy, creativity, the ability to think complexly, to connect authentically with others, those all require a neuroception of safety to operate optimally.
How does the body manage these state shifts so quickly? You mentioned the vagal brake earlier.
Right. The vagus nerve, specifically the more recently evolved myelinated part of it that's prominent in mammals, acts like a crucial physiological brake. It rapidly regulates our heart rate and metabolic output.
So when we're calm,
When we're feeling safe and calm, the vagal brake is fully engaged. It slows the heart rate, promotes digestion, conserves energy, the rest and digest state.
and when there's a challenge?
When neuroception picks up a cue of potential danger or just a need for mobilization, the brain can instantly release the vagal brake. This allows the heart rate to increase very quickly, mobilizing energy to support behavioral responses, preparing us for potential fight or flight without necessarily activating the full-blown stress response immediately. It's an incredibly fast and efficient regulatory mechanism.
Porges organized these different nervous system responses into a phylogenetic hierarchy based on their evolutionary age. Can you walk us through those three circuits and their implications?
Sure. So the oldest, most primitive defense circuit involves the unmyelinated vagus. This system triggers the immobilization response, the freeze, shutdown, or feigning death response. This kicks in when the threat feels overwhelming and escape or fighting seems impossible. Think possum playing dead.
Okay, the oldest is freeze. What's next evolutionarily?
Next up is the mobilization system, which is primarily driven by the sympathetic nervous system. This fuels the classic fight-or-flight response, more active, energy-expending defenses.
And the newest level, this is the key for our internal architecture, you said.
Yes, the newest system, which is unique to mammals, is the social communication system, sometimes called the social engagement system. This relies heavily on that myelinated vagus nerve we just discussed.
And what does it regulate?
It regulates the muscles of the face and head involved in social signaling, facial expression, vocal tone and prosody, even the muscles involved in listening attentively.
And we need to feel safe for the system to be online.
Absolutely. We must first be in a state of neurocepted safety to activate and utilize this social engagement system effectively. Its evolutionary function is to foster connection, co-regulation, bonding, cooperation.
The implication seems critical then.
It is. To be truly present, to be relational, capable of nuanced communication, empathy, complex thought, we need to shift the nervous system out of mobilization or shutdown modes and into this state of social engagement. Calmness isn't just the absence of threat. It's the active presence of this social engagement physiology.
Okay, so understanding that physical hierarchy makes it clear. The path to calm, to accessing that core self, requires actively engaging the body in ways that signal safety. How do we intentionally introduce care and help override that threat defense system?
This is where the practice of self-compassion, as researched by people like Kristen Neff, becomes so powerful and practical.
How does it work physiologically?
Practicing self-compassion appears to create a direct, observable physiological shift. It helps deactivate the threat defense system, the one characterized by high cortisol, adrenaline, inflammation, sympathetic overdrive.
And it activates something else instead.
Yes, it intentionally activates the care system. This is another mammalian system linked to oxytocin release and parasympathetic activity. It's associated with feelings of soothing, safety, connection, contentment. Basically, the physiology of feeling cared for and secure.
And there's scientific evidence for this shift.
Oh yes, absolutely. Numerous studies show that people who practice self-compassion regularly tend to have lower cortisol levels, especially under stress. They also show increased heart rate variability, or HRV.
And high HRV is good.
High HRV is a really robust marker of good vagal tone, strong parasympathetic activation, basically, the body's ability to flexibly shift into that calm, rest and recover state. So when we treat ourselves with kindness, especially when we're suffering, we're not just being nice, we are physically tapping into the body's innate system for safety and regulation.
It sounds incredibly practical, too. You mentioned it boiling down to a simple, fundamental question.
At its core, especially when you're struggling or feeling pain, the essence of self-compassion is asking yourself genuinely, what do I need right now?
What do I need right now?
Yeah. That question immediately shifts the focus away from self-criticism, blame, rumination, which often just keeps the threat system activated, right? That's fixed mindset territory again.
And it shifts towards.
Towards proactive care,
Mm.
towards resourcefulness, towards finding what would actually soothe, support, or help you in that moment. That's growth mindset territory, focusing on what can be done.
And this proactive care, this self-compassion, it doesn't always look soft and gentle, does it? The sources talk about brave self-compassion. That requires courage.
That's a really important point. Sometimes what we need most to alleviate suffering isn't just gentle acceptance, but fierce protection. When self-compassion is aimed at protecting ourselves from harm, whether that harm comes from external sources like unhealthy relationships or internal sources like self-sabotaging habits, it requires empowered clarity.
Meaning?
It means finding the courage to draw firm boundaries, to decisively say no to things that are draining or toxic, to act in alignment with our deep values, even when doing so is difficult, unpopular, or scary.
This feels like an integration point.
It really is. Mindfulness, which is often paired with self-compassion, provides the clarity to see the truth of the situation, including our own needs and values. And then brave self-compassion provides the courage, the motivation to speak and act on that truth, to take care of ourselves effectively.
And this whole process, the mindfulness, the self-compassion, the brave action, it seems to bring us back full circle to authenticity, doesn't it?
It's the final check on our internal architecture, you could say. Mindfulness facilitates that deep introspection needed for authenticity. It helps us clarify those innate beliefs, values, emotions that reside in that deeper Jungian self.
And without that consistent internal check-in.
We risk feeling increasingly frustrated, disconnected, maybe bored or numb. We risk realizing, often far down the road, that we're living someone else's script, doing the wrong things, maybe with the wrong people, chasing goals that don't actually align with our core being.
That famous line from the Talking Heads song captures it perfectly. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. That existential dread of realizing you're off track.
Exactly. Authenticity isn't a one-time achievement. It's the ongoing, moment-to-moment, intentional alignment of our external life, our choices, our actions, with those clarified internal values and the felt sense of self we've been mapping out.
Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. We have really covered some ground today. We've essentially completed our deep dive into this inner architecture.
It's quite a map.
It is. We started by mapping the absolute necessity of clarity, understanding cognitive dissonance, and how using tools like the bias interruption protocol can help us move beyond seeking just relief towards seeking something closer to truth.
Then we defined the self, not as some abstract idea, but as a deeply felt embodied psychic totality, drawing on James and Jung and seeing how connecting to this core relies on honoring those visceral interoceptive pathways, listening to the body.
Then we talked about agency, recognizing that our actions are usually multi-motivated thanks to Maslow, and seeing how genuine growth comes from choosing Adler's useful path of striving, contributing with social interest, and focusing diligently on the process of improvement, the growth mindset, as Dweck showed us.
And finally, we established that true calm and courage aren't just mental states. They're built on a solid physiological foundation. Understanding Porges's concept of neuroception and how we can intentionally activate the body's care system through self-compassion, leading eventually to that brave clarity needed for sustained authenticity.
So we've built, I think, a powerful case for the necessity of accessing this inner core, clarifying those inner beliefs and values to achieve a state of genuine coherence. This architecture, hopefully, provides that reliable source of strength we were looking for at the start.
Yes, but there's a final twist, a provocative thought we want to leave you with.
Okay.
We've spent this time establishing how clarity and authenticity are fundamentally rooted internally. In knowing yourself, trusting your felt sense, aligning with your values. Yet, and this is the tension, our deepest psychological mechanisms are also intensely wired for social validation, for belonging, for fitting in. Think back to those powerful forces of conformity we know about.
Like the Asch conformity experiment.
Exactly. Solomon Asch's classic studies showed that something like, 75% of participants would agree with an obviously, blatantly incorrect answer given by a group of Confederates just to avoid standing out, just to conform.
That's a staggering number when you think about it, agreeing that a shorter line is longer just because everyone else says it is.
It shows the immense power of social pressure. And remember, Festinger's work on cognitive dissonance. He also found that groups experiencing high dissonance may be because their beliefs are challenged by reality. What do they often do?
They proselytize, try to convert others.
Yes. They actively engage in efforts to change the beliefs of dissenters or outsiders. Why? to gain social validation for their own beliefs, which reduces their own collective dissonance. It makes them feel more secure in their possibly shaky beliefs if more people share them.
So here's the final question for you to ponder.
Knowing your inner truth, achieving that authenticity we've discussed, requires immense clarity, courage, and connection to that inner architecture. But how do you consistently maintain that authentic self? How do you hold on to your truth?
When some of your deepest psychological forces, the very ones wired for community and belonging that are also essential for our well-being, are simultaneously pressuring you, often unconsciously, to conform, to seek group validation, and maybe even to silence your own inner knowing.
That is the lifelong tension, the delicate balancing act that perhaps you can explore this week.